Left of the box. There was the Ontario Auditor General report on Ontario Place redevelopment, and here's what, so Chris Glover is an NDP MPP. And here is some of what this Auditor General report has found out so far. The total cost of redevelopment for this, and this is for the Ontario Place, that spa that they want to put in place, the forest that they leveled earlier, just a little while ago. I've been following this story in a lot of detail. There's the moving of the Ontario Science Centre. All of that is all connected to the same project. So the total cost of redevelopment is $2.2 billion, and the cost to move the Science Centre is now $1.4 billion, whereas the cost to keep it at its original location is $1.3 billion. So the roof panels that needed to be fixed, all the renovations that needed to happen on the building of the Ontario Science Centre to keep it where it is cheaper, far cheaper than what they're doing right now. The government is irresponsibly spending your money to benefit their friends. Infrastructure Ontario executives were given preferential treatment to some participants and no meeting minutes were kept. Funny how information with this government just seems to never materialize. Therm Canada met with Premier staff and were offered direct access to the Infrastructure Ontario assessor. Therm's original captive investment was $350 million. Therm says they're going to invest $700 million in capital investments now, but they don't even have a legal requirement to do so. Their promise is just words on page. The government expects $2 billion in estimated revenue for Therm over 95 years to make up for the government's $2.2 billion investment. Our great-grandchildren will be the ones to finally see Therm pay back the government for its upfront investment. We'll all be long gone. And again, just their optimistic view of how much this luxury spa is going to make, like it's going to become some sort of big tourist attraction, is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like the numbers that they've put in there, again, I've covered it all, and the numbers that they're projecting of people who will go to this luxury spa, like it's not exactly a theme park. You know, Canada's Wonderland doesn't pull in the numbers that they're projecting that they're going to pull in, basically. Others in the process are willing to cover the $1 billion in costs on transit parking and public realm space that the government is spending on Therm. We have other options, but they chose this one. Conservatives are not fiscally responsible, and this scandal proves it. And this is a bit more on the bombshell Auditor General report. Says Ontario Place redevelopment, not fair, transparent, or accountable.
Ontario's Auditor General Shelley Spence has released her first annual report. It includes 9 value-for-money audits, including sections on the redevelopment of Ontario Place and also the province's opioid strategy and the immigrant nominee program. According to Spence, there are problems with ministers' zoning orders and major cost overruns in relocating the Ontario Science Centre, among other issues.
Between 2018 to 2023, a total of 114 MZOs were made. We found that none of the information packages that the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing prepared for the minister during this time contained an assessment as to whether the MZO was necessary. The estimated cost of relocating the Ontario Science Centre to Ontario Place has increased nearly $400 million from the March 2023 business case that recommended the new building. We also found that the call for development process was not fair and transparent. For example, one of the participants was allowed to submit after the submission deadline and was presented as the preferred master developer, while others were ranked higher.
This is corruption in its boldest. Like, it's just undeniable corruption going on. It'd be like, oh yeah, the deadline passed, but we're still accepting this application from this company that we would prefer to go with. Like, Doug Ford's office can't be allowed to get away with this. It's absolutely ridiculous that it's gone on this long. And this is from Merritt Stiles. She's the current leader of the NDP, Ontario NDP that is. The Auditor General confirmed Therm hit the jackpot and Ontarians got ripped off. Minister Surma denied it over and over. She must resign. If she won't, Ford needs to fire her. Like that's going to happen. She's quote tweeting herself, though, saying, "I don't use this word lightly, but I will use it. Doug Ford's government is corrupt. The Minister of Infrastructure, Kinga Surma, misled Ontarians for years. Now taxpayers are footing the bill for more than $1.8 billion. She's got to resign, and Ford should fire her if she doesn't."
I do want to point out, I mean, we have, as has the media, also been pointing out issues with the process and concerns about this for some time now. And the Minister of Infrastructure has stood in her place and denied it over and over again, even though she knew perfectly well what happened here. And so I think, again, that the first thing that has to happen is that the Minister of Infrastructure needs to resign. And if she won't do it, the Premier should be firing her right now. I do want to...
The buck stops with the Premier, and he doesn't care. He's not holding any of his people accountable for the corruption, because why would he when he's involved with it, when it's his buddies that are benefiting from all this corruption? But it would not surprise me if in the next federal leadership run, if he were to run, he'd win. Like, that's a sad reality of it. It wouldn't surprise me. He could win. And the thought of him being like the prime minister of this country, it's just a slush fund for all of his rich buddies to get richer, for him to get richer. It is horrible. Because here we go. Ontario spent record sum on advertisements to promote governing party. Our government has spent more than any other previous administration in any other year on advertisements, which the Auditor General has found were designed to promote the governing party. Auditor General Shelley Spence found, as part of her annual report, in the fiscal year ending at the end of March, the province spent a total of $104.6 million on advertising. That is the most any Ontario government has ever spent on advertising in a single year, the Auditor General said, and triple what was spent the year before. Two biggest campaigns run over the past year focused on Ontario's economy and were worth roughly 65% of all government advertising last year. The Auditor General found advertisements were compliant with current legislation but would have broken partisan rules abolished in 2014. In the old act, partisan was much more defined, Spence said. So partisanship would have included that ads shouldn't have statements like some of them do. Is the ad providing information? Is it providing education? And in the ads that we outlined, it was really just fostering a positive view of the government party without providing other information that most ads would have. The former Liberal government changed those rules back in 2015, despite promising during the 2018 election to undo changes. The Progressive Conservatives decided to stick with them after they formed government. What? They went back on a promise? Especially one that benefits them? Shocking. Of course. Prior to 2015, ads were banned as partisan if the intent was to foster positive impressions of government or negative impressions of its critics. But then Liberal government amended the rules. And as we can see, this little graph here, 10-year trend in government advertising expenditures in millions, and it's skyrocketing up. The Auditor General's annual advertising report looked at government advertisements that have been playing through hockey games, the Super Bowl, and news bulletins over the past year. The government has refused to disclose how much has been spent on them. We assessed their primary purpose as promoting the government party, the report said. Under the original act, the advertisements would not have been approved by our office. Opposition critics who have long decried the government's advertising campaigns as a waste of public money jumped on the finding. Ontario NDP leader Merritt Stiles said spending public money on advertisements was shocking and outrageous. Bonnie Crumby, Liberal leader, claimed the Ford government was using taxpayer dollars to improve its standing ahead of a rumored early election. Doug Ford is using government money to seek power for power's sake, ignoring that you don't have a family doctor and that he never delivered the tax cut he promised you 6 years ago, Crombie said in a statement. The amounts spent on government advertising generally follow a pattern, peaking in the year before a provincial election, Spence wrote in the report. The money the government is set to spend on advertisements is likely to grow after the province unveiled an advertising targeting the U.S. in wake of the recent tariff threats at the beginning of the week.